YouTube. Hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. Let everybody in from the waiting room.
Right on.
Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our VBC Scuttlebutt for this Monday, August 12th. My name is Todd DiPastino. I am the director of the Veterans Breakfast Club, and I'm host of our Scuttlebutt, and I'll be flying this mission solo tonight. Sean Hall is off all week, so that means I'll be doing the chat and monitoring the Facebook side and YouTube side. So if I'm a little slow on the uptake, you'll understand why. Just for those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Veterans Breakfast Club is a nonprofit here based in Pittsburgh. We've been around since 2008. And our mission is to bring veterans together with members of the public and have veterans share their stories. We want to connect, heal, educate, and inspire. And pretty much every program that we have, in person, online, I think achieves that mission. Tonight, we have a really special program with two interesting people about a subject that most of us are familiar with. For many of us here, especially our Vietnam veterans, it's a searingly tragic memory, and that's the fall of Saigon, the last week of April 1975. And we have somebody with us here today, Eva Nguyen Whitfield, who was there. She was there. She left on the last fixed-wing flight out of Saigon on April 29th, 1975. She and Jason Nulton wrote this beautifully written book, I mean, riveting book called Uncommon Cargo, Sacrifice, Survival, and Hope. They're joining us and sharing the story of the fall of Saigon. And it's much, much more than just Eva's story and her family's story, which is riveting in and of itself and important in and of itself. It also gives the broader context of the collapse of the South Vietnamese government and, how do I say this, the abandonment of our allies South Vietnam, of the U.S. government. And it makes me think, and I think it makes a lot of us think of something that happened 3 years ago, coming up on Thursday, and that's the fall of Kabul and the end of our war in Afghanistan. We're going to be marking that anniversary on Thursday night, August 15th at 7 p.m., talking with people who are there, who are part of it, specifically my neighbor. Fakriya Hashimim left Kabul on August 15th, 2021, and she settled in to my neighborhood, and I asked her if she'd come on and share her story, and she will be doing that. So stay tuned. I'll be announcing this again later tonight. But I do want to first welcome Eva Whitfield. Hello, Eva. How are you?
Hello, how are you? Thank you for having me.
You're joining us from Northern Virginia?
That is right. Right outside DC.
And you really picked a great collaborator for your book in Jason Nulton, who's a very gifted writer. Jason teaches at Marietta University,
Yep.
Marietta College in Ohio. Jason, I thought I'd start with you and have you kind of, give us an introduction to the story and to the book. And I just want to emphasize again, it's a 400 plus page book. It tells the story of Eva's remarkable family and the escape from Saigon, but it also provides a wonderful history of the fall of Saigon.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. And we are definitely happy to be here. We've got some slides, and Eva is going to drive here, so I'm going to give her a minute to pull those up, and we'll get going here.
Oh, I have to make Eva co-host.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
There you go.
That's all right.
Eva, we were so busy gabbing before we went live here that
I know we had so much to talk about.
I didn't prepare you. You know what you're doing, huh?
Yeah, we definitely we've been through this a couple of times, and
you do know what you're doing. Okay, good.
So,
how's that?
That's perfect. If you'll flip to the next one, please, Eva. So, thank you guys for having us. It's really exciting for us to be here and talk to all of you. It's great to talk to veterans, especially because I am one myself. So my name is Jason Nulton, and together with with Eva here. We wrote Uncommon Cargo, which is based on the true story of her family's escape from Saigon as it fell in April of '75. You heard right, it's Eva, not Eva. So kind of like what Eva is how she first introduced herself to me, and it's just something that I've never forgotten. So I want to take you through a couple of slides here, just for starters. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of background, and then I'll turn it over to Eva, and she's going to get into some of the details about her family and her story. So if you'll flip to the next one, please. So I'm a veteran too. I like to let people know that, especially if I'm talking to veterans. I served in the Air Force for 20 years. I retired as a lieutenant colonel in 2015. So 20 years all over the world. I had 9 duty assignments, multiple deployments, been all over the Persian Gulf, the Levant, specifically Jordan. I've been to sub-Saharan Africa as well, Eastern Europe and Afghanistan. Never made it to Iraq, but I did make it to Afghanistan. Retired in 2015 out of the Pentagon, which is how I know Eva. And I also wrote, right around that time, I wrote or collaborated on another book called To War with the Fourth, which is a documentary book. It's not quite the same as Uncommon Cargo is, but that was nominated for the Army Historical Society's Distinguished Writing Award in 2016, which is something I'm pretty proud of. Now I've taken what I got out of the military, and I'm giving it back to younger generations. I'm teaching leadership at Marietta College, loving it. Evan and I have actually done a couple of, or we did a talk up here back in March, which was really awesome. So if you'll flip to the next one, please. So people say, why this story and why now? And for me, it kind of began with a while back with an interest in history. One thing that our military services do pretty well, and I'm sure you guys can all attest to, is those of you that are veterans, is they do a good job of keeping their history alive. So my first interest was Air Force history, because I was exposed to it, coming up through ROTC and then coming up through the ranks as well. And then, of course, when you learn about your Air Force history, you learn about your roots and that it began in the Army. And so you start going, oh, wow, what was the Army all about? And you learn about that. And so it just kind of blossomed for me from there. And it led to different interests, like different conflicts, World War II, things like that. And I just started kind of digging into that stuff. It was just so interesting to me. And eventually it hit me that, I've got family that served in these conflicts. And so I started asking those questions, and I knew a couple of things that my parents had told me over the years. But the one that I really like to highlight is on this slide right here. And if you see that upper left-hand photo right there, the old one, it's kind of hard to see, but it says on the top there, at the console of the outdoor organ in Kufstein, Austria. The bottom center, it reads, summer 1945. This is my Uncle Howard. He served in the Rainbow Division, which was, oh man, I covered up my notes. The Rainbow Division, the 42nd Infantry Division. I can't believe I just forgot that. But Rainbow Division was once commanded also by a guy named Douglas MacArthur, who maybe some of you guys have heard of. But my Uncle Howard here, after the war, right at the end of the war, occupied this town as part of his infantry regiment. And right across the German border, it happened to have a chateau on this ginormous rock in the middle of town, and it had a pipe organ at the top. And the keys for the pipe organ were actually at the bottom of the hill. And I remember hearing about this when I was young, and I remember this photo. This is a photo of him sitting at the keys. So I always thought this was pretty cool. So fast forward to 2006, and I'm assigned to Stuttgart, Germany. I'm working on the UCOM staff over there. And my mom flew over with my youngest sister, and we decided, let's go be tourists down in Vienna. So we drove to Vienna, and on our way, we stopped at Kufstein. And that photo right there is my son sitting at the same place as my Uncle Howard, just separated by 61 years. And so I just think it's the most profoundly cool thing. And it just lights a fire in me for history. And so it kind of worked that way when I heard Eva's story. So we all met in 2012, her husband Scott and me, because our kids were all in Boy Scouts together. I was assigned to the Pentagon at the time, but it wasn't until a couple of years later that I actually learned her family story, and that's that her dad was a South South Vietnamese Air Force C-130 pilot who rescued them all and hundreds of others from Saigon as it collapsed in April of 75. And it ended up being what we believe was the last flight out of Saigon on April 29th. And when she told me this, we were just kind of at the house hanging out in the kitchen like everybody does when you're being social, right? And I said to her, gosh, this is compelling. I mean, we've got to write this, and I guess I wasn't really sure whether she would go for it or not, but she did, and she bounced it off of her family, and we started coming up with questions, and we launched into the research. And I think one of the most gratifying things about all of it for me was when we got through most of the research, we discovered that there was a lot of stories that the family had shared with each other that they'd never shared before. And so, I think in some ways, maybe it was healing for them as well, just kind of going through this process. So awesome process to get through all that. If you'll flip to the next slide, please. The other thing that's so great about this book is it's told from kind of a unique angle here. If you think about it, most of the Vietnam stories that we know of, at least in the Western world here, are told through the U.S. military lens. If you think about it, you got films. Platoon is one. Apocalypse Now. Good Morning Vietnam. TV, maybe some of you remember Tour of Duty from the 80s. Also China Beach from the 90s. Dana Delaney was in that one, you might remember. Books like We Were Soldiers Once and Young, Hamburger Hill. Todd and Eva and I were talking before we went live here about documentaries like Last Days in Vietnam by Rory Kennedy, which is a fantastic film and actually a really good resource for writing this book and leading to other research that we found ourselves getting into. So documentaries like that, comic books, video games. There's so much stuff out there about Vietnam, but almost all of it, at least in the Western world, is told through the lens of the GI, of the American GI. So we don't really hear very much told through the lens of the families who actually lived through this. And this is one of those stories. They are out there, but they are few and far between. So these are voices that are not heard often, and the stories are just as dramatic as the ones that we're familiar with, if not more. If you flip to the next slide, please. So that's kind of the genesis of where this book was born. I'm going to turn it over to Eva now. This is really what it's all about for me, is this set of pictures right here. So down there at the bottom, we're not exactly sure when that photo was taken, but we think it was within a year prior to the fall of Saigon. That is Eva on the right and her younger brother Truc on the left and her mother Mai right there. And then you see the three of them again, 49 or so years later right there at the top. So that's the hope part for me. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eva.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jason. So hello, everyone. It's really an honor to be with you tonight. For the next few minutes, I just want to share a little bit more about my family story so you can hopefully get to know them a little better and connect with us. So let me start by introducing you to my immediate family. So you're actually looking at a picture from almost 50 years ago. That's me, not in the white dress, but actually in the yellow shirt and striped pants that I'm being held by my father, Chau. My younger brother, Truc, is actually being held by my mom, Mai. So I think this picture was taken about 3 to 4 weeks before the fall of Saigon. We're actually in front of our house in Saigon. And I think the smiles really say it all. We were a happy family. So we were, yes, living in dangerous and tumultuous times, but there was a lot of joy throughout the house. This is actually the last photo of us taken together as a family. So now I'm going to introduce you to my father, Chau. You're looking at one of my most prized possessions, and that's my favorite picture of him. We don't have too many, so I treasure this above all else. Now, to the right, you're actually looking at his certificate of training, which is from the United States Air Force. In 1972, he came to Texas to complete the C-130 instructor pilot course. Now, he loved being a pilot. Everybody in my family tells you that. My mom, my grandparents, when they were alive. He was a lieutenant colonel in the South Vietnamese Air Force, as Jason mentioned earlier. Now, unfortunately, he's representing the sacrifice part of our story. Growing up here in the United States, I never really fully grasped the impact of his absence in my life until I got older, and definitely more so when I had my own 2 kids. I've lost count of the times of the years where I wondered what life would have been like had he been able to escape with us. But ultimately, it was his sacrifice that ensured our survival that day that we fled, so we could all live and see a brighter future here. Of course, I wish I could have known him. I wish that my sons could have known him. But my hope is that by sharing this story with you and others, in some small way, we can honor him and just keep his memory alive. So next, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my amazing grandparents. My grandfather Hong on the left and my grandmother Dad on the right there. They truly were the rocks of our family. Now, my grandfather was an architect in Vietnam in Saigon. He owned a huge rubber plantation. It was located in the jungles outside of Saigon near the Cambodian border. Sometimes my mom and her 7 siblings would actually stay there overnight. And apparently on those occasions when that happened, nobody slept a wink because they could hear tigers roaming throughout the night and growling. And in the morning, they could see the footprints around the houses where they stayed, which were raised. Now, his biggest customers were actually American companies like Michelin. I'm sure you've heard of them. He was actually the breadwinner of a very large family, supporting his 8 kids and wife. And he also supported his siblings and parents as well. So that kind of gives you an understanding why he couldn't leave when Saigon fell. There was way too much to lose. He wasn't ready to give up his country. He wasn't ready to give up his social status or his livelihood when that time came. Now, it was actually my grandmother, Dad, who took care of the entire family, including her grandkids. She was small in size, yes, standing around 4 feet, 10 inches tall, but she was incredibly strong. She was actually the constant in our lives, the glue that held us all together. Never once when I was growing up did I ever hear her complain about anything, even though things were tough at times. She was always present for her kids. She was always present for her grandkids, and she showered us with love and devotion. I'll always be grateful for that. But together, my grandparents raised a very, very close-knit family that was always there for each other then and now. So not only did we survive in Saigon, but we actually thrived there before it fell. We had a good life. Like many Vietnamese families in that era, there were many generations that were living under one roof. That's me being held by my grandmother, Dad, who's next to 2 of her 3 sons and 2 of her grandkids. We actually lived together in a 3-story house that my grandfather built. There was always a lot going on, constant commotion. It was never quiet, and it was never dull, but that's exactly how the family liked it. Now, during the course of the Vietnam War, we also rented parts of the house out to Americans. We believe that they worked for the CIA. They never told you directly, but they were actually the basis of some fictional characters that are profiled in the book. So reasons why we think they worked for the CIA is because before they left, they destroyed everything. They burned equipment, papers, and documents just to make sure nothing was left behind. And one of them actually introduced my family to grilled cheese sandwiches. That was the first time they ever tried it. And to this day, it's one of their favorite memories. And one of them, Dario, would actually give me M&Ms, sneaking them on the side as a treat. I think that's pretty much where my sweet tooth started. So in this picture, you're actually looking at my grandmother, Dad, with her 8 kids. She had 5 girls first, and then 3 boys. Yes, in that order. In Vietnamese culture, it's really important to have a son to carry on the family name. And that dream came true when my Uncle Sonny was born. He's actually the tallest boy in the middle there, right in front of my grandmother. He was basically treated like a king, like royalty from day one. My mom and his other sisters remember how he had special food imported from France just for him. He had fancy formula and apples, which were considered a delicacy. And his sisters were always envious of meal times when he was having meal times. So, for example, they would hang out to make sure maybe he'll share a delicious slice of an apple with us. That typically didn't happen because Uncle Sonny was a big eater then. Now I'm going to take you to the beginning of our new life here in the United States. After our escape from Saigon, in a few weeks, we went from Saigon to Thailand to Guam to Hawaii to San Diego and then to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas for processing. You're actually looking at my refugee card at the very top there. And that's my Uncle Tuan right below mine. They were actually issued to us at Fort Chaffee after we arrived. I was only 3 years old, and my Uncle Tuan was about 9 years old at this time. He was actually the baby, the youngest of my grandparents' kids, but because we were so close in age, I always viewed him, and still do today, as an older brother. So as you can see in that picture, I had a pretty big smile on my face. I'm too young to really understand or realize that my dad would never join us. I'm often asked if I remember anything about that escape from Saigon on that C-130 on April 29th, 1975. My one memory is actually quite vivid. I used to think it was a recurring dream when I was a child until I shared it with my mom one day when I was in elementary school. She told me it was a memory of being on that desperate flight out when we fled Vietnam. In this memory, I was inside that C-130 plane, and I could see nothing but a sea of black hair all around me. It was crowded. Everyone was huddled together. It was really loud, and I could hear a lot of crying around me. I found out later that we were missing the man door, which added to the elevated noise levels. So after Fort Chaffee, we headed to our final destination, which was Falls Church, Virginia. And the reason why we ended up there was because my mom's cousin was actually married to an American, David Payne, who lived there. We were actually fortunate enough to live with them when we first arrived. So grateful that they opened up their homes to us. It was definitely a full house. They already had their own family. And soon after, Falls Church, Presbyterian Church, came into the picture and sponsored our family. We owe them so much. They didn't even know us, yet they welcomed our family, complete strangers to them, and they made sure we had the support that we needed to start over. That's clothes, that's food, and even a home next to the church to live in after we left my cousin's house. I even learned how to ride a bike in that church's parking lot. And many years later, I even got married at this church, even though we had moved away from the area. It just meant that much to me. So to this day, I'm in awe of just the incredible generosity and support that they provided for us. We could not have rebuilt our lives without their help. This family picture shows a day that my grandfather Hong actually arrived in Falls Church. He actually escaped by boat 1 year after we left. And this is us when they were reunited. And in the back row, you can see some of our church sponsors who were there to warmly welcome him that day. We were actually close with some of our sponsors from Falls Church, such as retired Brigadier General Hamlin here in this picture that I'm circling here. We treasure a lot of the memories that we had with him. He was always there for us in big moments. So for example, I remember him being there when my brother and I got our US citizenship, and also he was there for my wedding as we were growing up. So speaking of moments, I want to take this opportunity to thank this great country. There is no other like it. When our family was in our most desperate time of need, it was the United States of America and its citizens that welcomed us as refugees and helped us to rebuild our lives. My hope is our story reminds people of the incredible good within the United States and within Americans. In fact, one of the main reasons why I wanted to be here today is I never knew how I could publicly thank the Vietnam veterans whom I've never met, who defended our freedom in Saigon, who helped us to restart our lives at Fort Chaffee and supported our entire family in our local community. You made this blessed life possible for me and my family. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifices. Thank you for giving us hope when we needed it the most so we could strive for a better future here. We are eternally grateful. Thank you very much.
Eva, I have to ask, who's that handsome Marine in the photo?
That is my Uncle Tuan. Remember the refugee picture?
Okay.
That's him as a Marine. Yeah, he became a Marine captain. So this here, these two people, this was us when he was a captain in the Marine Corps.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How wonderful. I want to open it up for conversation and for questions. There's a lot here. There's a lot to this story, and it's a beautifully told one. And I just want to take a moment and congratulate, and I may be leaving Eva out of this, but congratulate Jason on the research. Eva, I assume that you did research and maybe some of the writing even, but the writing is so beautiful and it's so engaging. And it so surprises me because Jason, it's not like you have a long track record as a novelist or a creative nonfiction writer. Really, from the first few pages, it just grabbed me and didn't let me go. This book, and again, I don't want to talk too much, but I just want to let people know this book really does put you into the position that Eva and her family was in April of 1975 in Saigon. You really feel the heat, you feel the fear, you feel the rifle butt hitting your cheekbone, you feel all the awful things that happened in this story, and it's a real achievement, Jason. I don't want to embarrass you too much, but I will say that it is a real achievement, truly an achievement. Ben Wright, thank you so much for joining us here.
Sure. Well, Eva, thank you so much for sharing. It's always good to get the human, personal side of the stories. I was a C-130 pilot, and I
like your
flew in
background.
and out of Tan Nguyen on April 28th, 1975. Was in about noontime and picked up about 220 refugees and took them back to Clark Air Base in the Philippines. It's interesting, Air Force history has recorded about the aircraft that flew out. It was one that was transferred from the 314th Tactical Airlift Wing at Little Rock and was the only one that wasn't destroyed on a ramp the night of the 28th. In fact, our wing lost an aircraft on a ramp the night of the 28th at Tan Nguyen, and had 430 people on board and 60 something in the cockpit. When she's talking about seeing only black hair, I'm sure that was true. And they were well overweight. They wound up disoriented in the Gulf of Thailand to the south and turned north and saw Utapao and landed at Utapao Royal Thai Naval Air Base in Thailand. The aircraft was actually returned to the wing at Little Rock Air Force Base and is today a static display aircraft. Up there, somebody's put a picture, there it is, of the aircraft is at Little Rock is static display.
Jason, you think that's the plane, Jason and Eva?
Yeah, I'll comment on that. So maybe we think so. We hope it is. We think that it is. Our publisher, actually, Bob Babcock, is owner of Deeds Publishing, actually found this online. He was searching for images of C-130s and came across this, and then there was a little write-up about it saying it was the last flight out. And when he told me, I thought, holy cow. And so we actually reached out to the wing historian at Little Rock Air Force Base and also a curator at the Air Force Museum down in Dayton. And so we have a copy of the history of the tail. There's a couple things that are a little different from our story or from Eva's story. One, of course, is that the names of the crew are not Eva's family. And in Eva's story, you guys might have heard her mention that the man door on the left side, the port side of the C-130 that they flew out was actually missing. It was down for parts for maintenance at the time, which is what made it a little easier to be inconspicuous about it. And so that isn't mentioned in the unit history or the tail history either. So there's definitely some research that we want to do, but I'm very interested in maybe getting on the phone with you, sir, if that'd be okay at some point, because I'd like to pick your brain a little bit about this one.
Oh yeah, I'd be glad to. I mean, all I know about it's what I've seen in the official Air Force release about it.
I think there's got to be, we need to do a little bit more research, and there was a lot of chaos that day, and we still don't know exactly what happened with Eva's father too. And so we're hoping that we can maybe through this book find other people who maybe were passengers on that aircraft who might know something.
And I've also pledged the help of Peg Dybel and Deb Bussinger at the Military Aviation Preservation Society Museum in North Canton, Ohio. I've pledged their help. I'll have to tell them about that, but they are really they're excellent researchers on historical aircraft. Hi, how are you? If you want to unmute.
I am good, Todd. Nice to see you again. It's been
Good
a
to
long
see you.
time. You couldn't believe how ecstatic I was when I received your email and learned that the show today is with the two authors, Jason and Eva. And the reason for that was Eva was actually my distant cousin, long lost since 1975. And we didn't even know, I didn't even know her because at that time she was about a little more than 2 years old. And she left on the 29th. And you guys heard my story. My dad took us on the 30th of April. And last night when I talked to our aunt, her aunt and my aunt in Toronto, she was also equally ecstatic because we couldn't believe that Todd would bring her on. And then for me to see my long lost cousin, I never thought I would have a chance to even recognize, see her face. This is the first time I see her face.
Yao Ju? My goodness.
No,
We have to get in touch after this, huh?
I'm only your cousin. It's because I call Yi Jin in Toronto.
Jin? Okay.
She's my mom, younger
Yes.
sister.
So he called my dad's youngest sister in Toronto is what he's telling me.
Right.
That's how I got connected.
Right.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So he has, yeah. So that's the connection. Okay. Go Jin? Okay.
I call Yi Jin. You call Go Jin because I'm from the mom. My mom. You call
Okay. I'll have to give her a
So
call after this.
So this is Chau's younger sister.
Yes.
Your father's younger sister, the
She's
hero.
the baby of the family, but she's alive, and there's an older sister that's still alive too that lives in Toronto.
Oh, how fascinating. How wonderful. I highly recommend you read the book, Hi.
Okay, Todd, I will.
I mean, what a wonder. I mean, you it's not like you need to read it because you lived it, but it really it is fascinating.
I know the story, just verbal telling from relatives, but it would be nice to read it in the book to have the understanding the full story.
Maybe your
Wonderful to
cousin
see you.
will be nice enough to sign a copy. Mary,
There you go, Eva.
Sister Mary Nell. Thank you.
Of course.
Mary Nell, could you unmute, please? I was hoping you would join us tonight, and I want you to. Hi, Mary Nell.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm wondering if Eva could recount for us some of the events in her family's life the last couple of days in Saigon, as well as how did they get to Tan Nguyen, and how did they get on this airplane when so many were trying to escape?
Yes, and actually that's kind of how the book starts out. What happened there? So I think, as Jason mentioned earlier, the plane was damaged. It was missing the man door. That was part of the reason why it wasn't discovered, and it was actually hidden in a hangar, or it was probably there to get repairs. And so, since my dad was the C-130 pilot, he was aware of that. He actually tried to get home to get my family, and he came home to get me, my younger brother, my mom, my grandmother, and the three younger brothers that my mom had. My grandfather refused to go, and he couldn't make it back because of the constant shelling and strafing. Right, Jason? Did I get that terminology right?
Yep.
So it took him a while to basically get a break into that. We didn't live very far from the airport. It was about 2 miles or so. But because the streets were chaotic, people were, are panicked. It was just not easy to get to us. When he was finally able to get back to the house, I mean, everybody just basically grabbed the clothes in their back and whatever they could fit into a suitcase. My dad was wearing a flight suit, and they have a lot of zippers all over it. And I remember my mom was telling me that he had stuffed them with jewelry, money, whatever he could of valuable, so we would have something, when we get somewhere, hopefully safely. But he was able to make it to us from Tan Son Nhut Airport when some of the shelling and the strafing kind of died down, and we made it back to the airport. And I wouldn't be surprised if he knew some of the soldiers or people. We fictionalized what happened within the book, but once we got to the airport, just making it to the plane, he was his co-pilot. We were able to make it on with hundreds of other people, but he was the one that was supposed to be piloting that plane. And I don't want to give away too much, but
Well,
that kind of
yeah,
sets up his
and I
movie.
just maybe I will give away a little bit just because I do think that that the magic is in the details of the story, but in the broad outline, Mary Nell, Eva's father conspired to steal a C-130
Pretty much.
and to keep it damaged so that it wouldn't be suspected of being airworthy, and then kind of secretly jamming 300, 350, almost 400 people into it before it took off on April 29th, 1975. The most tragic part of the story is he was not on that plane.
Right.
And that's a very important part of the story. Mary Nell, would you mind sharing with people your plans for travel to Vietnam in April?
Certainly. Toby Garrett and Mary Murray are also on the call video chat this evening, and we're all working together for those orphan children who were adopted throughout the world to have an opportunity to come back to Vietnam on the occasion of the 50th anniversary, particularly of the cargo plane, the C-5A, that crashed on April 4th, carrying 176 of our children and 6 volunteers. We lost 76 children, 100 survived, and we lost 4 volunteers, 2 survived. And shortly after the 28th of April, then our program there in Saigon finished. But then, of course, the work of caring for the children, infants, toddlers, little children, continued, and then placement with adoptive families around the world. Europe, Australia, Canada, and the US. And so we're going to have a large group traveling together to Vietnam at the end of March next year and staying the first couple of weeks in April, visiting places that are significant in their history. Where were they being cared for in April 1975? Some of the adoptees who will be traveling with us had already come home to their adoptive families in 1973 and 1974, earlier in 1975. And the orphanage in which they had first been cared for before they came up to Saigon, to our nurseries, where we were providing care before their arrangements could be made to travel to adoptive families. We'll have a memorial service on April 4th as close to the actual crash site as is possible, and then be on a wonderful tour throughout Vietnam in the Delta up to Da Nang and Hoi An and Hue. And then some will extend to go into Hanoi and Ha Long Bay.
Wow.
That's wonderful. And Mary Nell, you were a nun at an orphanage in Vietnam.
At a nursery, actually. That's what we called our facility, since it was, if you will, a halfway house
Okay.
between the orphanage and their new adoptive families. Rosemary Taylor, an Australian ex-Mercy sister, had founded the program in the late 1960s and opened one house, then two, then three, then four, and then evacuation during April 1975.
Were you there in 1975?
I was in San Francisco in April of 75, receiving the children as they arrived.
Got it. And Mary Murray, I'll invite you if you want to unmute to tell us a little bit of your story if you'd like. Toby, Garrett also. You left Saigon, Mary, in April 1975? Oh, you just muted yourself. There you go. Oh, we can't hear you. Can't hear you. Maybe something's wrong with at least I can't hear you. And Toby, how about you? Can we hear you?
Oh, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes. How are you, Toby?
I'm doing well. Thank you. And thank you for this wonderful presentation. I have enjoyed this one and several other ones in the past.
I appreciate
Thank
you
you.
joining us. And are you planning on going back to Vietnam in April?
Yes, we've been planning this tour to take adoptees back for almost actually 10 years. And so it's finally happening. We're very excited. We have about 33 adoptees going back with us and about 60 people total.
Wow. Wait, what a trip that's going to be. Take pictures.
Yes, we'll take pictures and videos. We love to do that. So we'll get it all recorded for everyone.
Now, what is your story? What is your background and when did you leave Saigon?
My background is probably pretty typical. I was born in 1969 and not knowing anything about my biological family or anything. Just thinking that a lot of us were malnourished. So it was common that we were like 3.5 pounds, 4 pounds when we were born. And so we just feel very fortunate that we survived. We had a lot of care with the nuns and other care workers and healthcare workers and very, very kind, giving, dedicated people. We survived because of them. And so a lot of us were adopted out basically to several countries throughout the world. And I was fortunate enough to be adopted to a wonderful family in Loveland, Colorado. Just grew up with so much love and support. Just really had a fantastic childhood. I'm happily married. I'm a clinical pharmacist these days with a family. I love to volunteer and help people be the best person they can be and enjoy life.
Toby, I think you're getting us choked up here. It's just wonderful to have you kind of share this story a little bit. You were old enough to remember this. You were old enough to remember leaving, right?
Some of the adoptees were old enough. A lot of us were so young. Like I came over when I was 3 months old.
Okay.
3.5, so I don't remember it myself, but I know I was just really, really sick. Like the first thing that I did when I got here to Denver was to go to a hospital because I was just so malnourished and, just throwing up, diarrhea, just not, able to accept the formula they were giving me. And so I'm really grateful for the people who looked after me in the airplane on the trip over here because
kept you alive.
Pretty tough.
Kept you alive. Mary, can we hear you now or no? No, what the heck? All right, we'll keep trying. Toby, thank you so much for sharing just a little bit of the story. Jason, you did a lot of research and you've talked to people, Jason Nulton, about Operation Babylift, correct?
I was actually stationed with a former nurse who was on the C-5 that crashed. Her name was Regina Ani. It's like a Norwegian last name. She was a full colonel '06 when I went on to active duty in 1995, and we were stationed together at McCord Air Force Base out in Washington. And I knew that she had been a part of that even back in those days. I knew that she was on that C-5, so I knew about Babylift. I knew about the evacuation of Saigon. Yeah, even then. But it wasn't really until recently, going through the writing process of this book with Eva's family, that I thought about that again. And so I've not reconnected with her, but I found out some pretty cool stuff about just some press articles on her online that I found in the course of doing the research. And she actually adopted one of the refugee babies who was on board.
Did she really? Oh my,
Yeah.
what a story. Mary Nell, you have your hand up.
Yes, because I want Julie Zadinsky, who's on our call this evening, to also tell about her experiences. She was a nurse in two of our nurseries, not simultaneously in one and then in another. And so she really kept a lot of children alive until their adoptive families could take over with excellent medical care in their homes. Julie, are you willing to share a bit with us?
Oh, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Julie, we can.
Hey. Yeah, I worked there for a couple years, and then I was on the flight that went out after the plane that crashed with all of the little babies. So we were the time I was working with the smaller babies, so I was in a plane that was bound for Australia. Thought it would be closer to try to keep the babies alive till they could get there. So that's when I left. But we did work, gave the babies a lot of love, and also had to give them good nutrition and some medical care, health care as best we could, and while they were waiting to be connected with their families. So all of them had kind of a different journey out. In talking and meeting with some of the adoptees recently, it's too bad that so many of them want to know more of the details about, what orphanage did they come from, and what nursery did they go to, and this and that. Like, I guess all of us want to know, but a lot of that information is lost. I know I had all the records for all of our children on the flights out, but it didn't make it. The important thing made it. We got all of our little babies there safely to Australia, but all of our medical records didn't. So it's nice when people do have a story that they know about, because as we get older too, I think it is important to everyone to know some of that.
I often have this feeling during our programs that I'm in the company of greatness and heroes, and you're one of them, Julie. Thank you very much for I know you would never ever consider yourself such, but keeping babies alive during the evacuation of Saigon, that's a pretty big accomplishment and pretty big sacrifice. Eva, have you ever been back to Vietnam?
Actually, I have been. So in 2017, we took my mom back with my husband and two young sons. So we spent 2 weeks there, and it was a magical time. I mean, obviously there were bittersweet memories, but our house was still standing. It's still there. It's a government building now. But we wanted to make sure my mom had some good memories, after she had left so many years ago. And I don't think she'll go back after this time, but I'm so glad we were able to all be together there.
Can I ask you, was it bitter more than sweet to go back, or was it sweet more than bitter?
I think maybe sweeter for me because I was always curious, right?
Yeah.
Like where did I live? What did it look like? And just to be immersed in the culture and the language. Probably more bitter for my mom. I think it's more about what was lost. But
Yes.
I think
It
having,
does
you
this
know,
once in a
us
while.
there with her, I think
Right.
that
Hello.
it definitely helped.
All right. Mary Nell.
Eva, do you know what happened to your father? Was he taken to re-education camp?
We hear you, Mary. I'm sorry, Mary Nell. We hear you, Mary Murray.
Oh,
Good.
good,
It's
good, Mary.
working. We'll unmute you in a second. But Mary Nell, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mary Nell, but
Oh, that's okay.
this is a really important part of the story. Your father, she does know, Mary Nell, how her father died, although not all the details. I'm curious. You want to share with
Yeah.
people, Eva?
So, I mean, I would love to one day. Maybe I don't want to know, but the theory is when my father was trying to escape, he was supposed to fly the plane out. That was the whole idea, right? And my mom and my brother saw him go up into the cockpit of that jam-packed C-130. That was the last image they had. And you know, we did make it out. We were definitely flying low because the door was missing. And when we got to Thailand, my grandmother got off the flight. I think they were trying to refuel right before we go to the next destination. I think it was in Guam. My grandmother had overheard other passengers talking and saying, "Oh my gosh, that poor pilot, he was shot and killed on
Oh,
the tarmac."
gosh.
So
Oh,
the theory we think is it was obviously very chaotic. As I think they were trying to back out of the hangar. The theory was there might have been a truck that was blocking the way. So he had to get off to move the truck. And most likely he was shot by, you know, somebody else that was furious or angry they couldn't get on board. So they shot the pilot. So, you know, obviously this was all what she heard and we kind of have deducted over the years. So, but you know, we never had obviously a proper burial or anything like that. But you know, he just didn't make it out. And my grandmother decided not to tell my mother in Thailand that had happened. She just said, "Oh no, he'll be on the next flight." He got delayed because she was worried if my mom found out the truth, she would refuse to go any further with on the trip with me and my brother. So she just let her believe that he was still alive. So it wasn't until we got to Guam that she found out, my mother.
Oh, Eva, what unbelievable trauma your family went through. Al Smith, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I have a question of Eva and Jason. I met a gentleman from South Vietnamese in my gym, and he was in the South Vietnamese Army, and I noticed he had jump wings on his hat. And I said, "Oh, you must have got those at Fort Benning." He said, "No, I got those in Vietnam." And I guess from what I understand, the South Vietnamese did make jumps in Vietnam as opposed to the Americans who only made one. And I guess he was in a special unit or whatever. And when the North Vietnamese came south, the American government got him and his family out fast because they knew he would have been dead. He was that high up or that influential or whatever. And I guess I always thought or asked, who determined who got out and who didn't? They got him and his family out, but there must have been a lot of situations going on. How did they draw straws and know who to get out?
Great question, Al. Great question. Jason, I'm
Do
going
you
to
know
throw
when he got out? Do you like what day?
I do not know.
Okay. What I've run across just in researching this and I'm actually I'm doing a class for the book as well, and I'm preparing for that. So I'm going through a lot of the old research, but it's hard to know because it was so chaotic, and especially the last week or so before the actual collapse was really scary. And you had a lot of people that were making for the port of Saigon, as well as the airport, the base as well. And it was just chaos. And if you do a search online, you can actually find photos of, if you do a search for this fall of Saigon and you Google search photos, you'll find a ton of them, and you can see how overloaded these ships are and vehicles are. And so what the embassy personnel did at the end, is they actually went against Ambassador Martin's standing orders, and they actually began to help a lot of these senior South Vietnamese officials and their families get out. So it was military officials, it was just different government officials, but also their families, and not just their kids and their spouse, but their extended families as well. So the folks that were doing that were doing it under the radar of the powers that be that were there at the time. Eventually it was discovered, but by the time that it didn't matter anymore. But it was pretty much who you know. I know that there was a guy named Stu Harrington. He was an Army captain at the time who was stationed in Vietnam. He was actually one of the last guys that got out. And he was one of the ones that got involved in moving some of these South Vietnamese officials. And the interviews of him, he says things like, it's who you know. Who do you know? And he said, for me, it was, these people. It was senior intelligence officials in the South Vietnamese, government were the ones that he knew. So that's who he went after. So I think that it just depended. I know too that Eva's family would also have been high risk as well because of Chau. But also because of Hong, Eva's grandfather was harboring Americans for years and years, these guys that we suspect were CIA, and actually wanted to try and help get the family out. So he would have been a collaborator as well. He was very lucky that he was able to escape. And so I think it was just, you had a lot of Americans at the time who were trying to do the right thing. They were encumbered by red tape, I think. And did the right thing rather than the legal thing, and they got as many of these folks out as they could. It was chaos. They weren't sure about whether these guys were armed. There was weapons everywhere, and you pat them down and try to do search for weapons and things like that, but you don't always catch everything. It was just a risky, awful situation. So there really wasn't a common vetting process across the entire thing. It just never happened. It was so chaotic. They just left when they could.
Hi.
Yes, Todd, I just want to contribute to the question that Al asked, and Jason answered that at the time, at the last week or months, there was really no plan to evacuate anybody. For example, like I shared with you guys before, in my case, my family was on the list to be evacuated by the U.S. Embassy, but it's too early, like in the April 20th. And my dad could not dare to even leave at that time because he would be court-martialed. So on the last day, April 30th, that's when only our family, our immediate family, my dad, my mom, and the 3 siblings was on the big ship that 5,000 other people. They are total strangers, and my dad had to captain that out to the sea. And then his fellow captain was not that fortunate because all of the big ship kind of lie up on the Saigon River to leave almost at the same time. And one of my dad fellow captain on a different ship, he left because he forgot something. He just went home. And when he came back, somebody else took his ship. So he left behind, he ended up in the re-education camp. So that all of the tragic during the last day of the war. And oh, by the way, next year, my group will organize a big event called 50 years of the April 30 in Washington, D.C. by the Vietnam Veteran War Memorial.
Wonderful. That'll be a 50th anniversary event,
Yeah.
and we'll love to get the word out, if not participate
Yep.
in that. Hi, that'd be wonderful.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
I'm sorry. I do want to prepare Jason. I want to ask Jason about the negligence on the part of especially Ambassador Graham Martin not preparing an evacuation when it was very clear that Saigon was going to fall and the South Vietnamese government was not going to survive. But first, I do want to remind people this is the Veterans Breakfast Club. We meet every Monday night at 7 p.m. and most Thursday nights at 7 p.m. And it just so happens that on Thursday night is the 3rd anniversary of the fall of Kabul, Afghanistan. We're going to be doing a program with Afghan refugees, one of whom is Fakriya Hashimim, who lives in my neighborhood, and she has a story that is eerily similar to the one we're hearing tonight, and equally hair-raising, I would say. We're also doing a special program on Thursday, August 29th. We're doing World War II Jeopardy. As you know, Thursday night, we often do World War II themed programs, and we're having a special 2 rounds of open World War II Jeopardy. That'll be Thursday, August 29th at 7 p.m. This is our magazine that goes out every quarter. We send it out to about 10,000 households, and we hand distribute about 8,000 more. This issue is our summer issue and is devoted entirely to the air war in Europe in World War II. And that's because Glenn Flickinger, who is on this call tonight, our host of our Greatest Generation Live Thursday night program, he spent about 20 weeks covering the air war in Europe because of the Masters of the Air series on Apple Plus TV. We took the stories that we heard at our events and have written them up in magazine form. If you didn't get this in the mail, it's because we don't have your address. Please just let me know. We'd be happy to send 1 or 25 or 50 or 100 copies to you if you'd like. You could email me at todd@veteransbreakfastclub.org. We are very grateful to our sponsors, Tobacco Free Adagio Health. They've been sponsoring us in this program for years now. They are a wing of Adagio Health, which looks after the care of children and families, and their tobacco-free wing focuses on the hazards of tobacco use, and they educate people about those hazards. They advocate for healthier places to live, work, and play, and they help people to quit. You could access more of their information at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. And you could also access information about Medicare for Life if you are like Jason Nulton and you are a retired military personnel. You might be interested, Jason, when you're much, 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 much older than you are, in investigating UPMC for Life's Medicare programs. They have one that is made for veterans by veterans, and you can learn more about it at upmchealthplan.com/Medicare. Finally, I'm going to put a link to a 2.5-minute survey that we have. We always ask, how do we do with this program? How can we improve? Do you have ideas for other guests, other topics, other conversations we could have? And I'll put that link here in the chat. All right. Jason, Ambassador Graham Martin, he is profiled much in your book, deservedly so. Here he is pictured with the president, Gerald Ford, Henry Kissinger, and Frederick Wayand, it looks like, this Army general. Here is Graham Martin. I think this was taken before the fall of Saigon. I am let me ask you.
Yeah, I think so.
Could you give people an overview of his responsibility for some of the chaos of March and April 1975?
Right. So Graham Martin was a complicated guy, controversial guy. I'm not a Graham Martin expert, but I can tell you what I know and what I've found out that we put into the book. Is fairly negative until the very, very end. And then he kind of redeems himself a little bit, which happened in real life. But he was appointed and took up office, I want to say it was 72 or 3. He was there, I think, right around the time that we pulled troops out, which would have been 73. So he served under 2 administrations because Nixon, of course, resigned in 74, and then it was Ford after that. Graham Martin was he believed that the Vietnam War could still be won in 1975. He was one of the very few people in the American government who thought that. He also had an adopted son, Glenn, who was a Marine Corps helicopter pilot in 1965, so 10 years earlier. And at that time, Graham Martin was the ambassador to Thailand, so he was right next door. His son was shot down in his helicopter and killed in action. And so there was a feeling amongst some of the people that were involved in the evacuation that Graham Martin had he just felt like he couldn't let Vietnam go because he had given so much to that country, including the life of his own son. And so most of what's out there basically has him, believing until the last minute that it could all be fine, despite the fact that all this stuff, this unstoppable train of North Vietnamese, communism was just barreling down at him from the north. So it wasn't really until the end, and there was a plan that the embassy had to help evac people. It's called Plan Alamo, and that was something that was put together by the Defense Attaché Office, and it was supposed to handle, I think it was about 1,500 or so refugees for a number of days. There was food, water, there was bee huts to sleep in, there was latrines and showers and things like that, and that was going to be the transition from the chaotic situation into, hey, we're going to get you out of here. Graham Martin didn't pull the trigger on that until April 28th. So
you're breaking up a little bit, Jason. So I'm gonna interrupt a little bit and just say,
and so he took a lot of. Sorry,
Jason,
Sorry
you're breaking just a little bit. But yeah, Graham Martin didn't pull the trigger on Plan Alamo until April 28th, 1975. Which was far too late to get everybody out who needed to get out. But in the end, how many South Vietnamese people ended up getting out? Are you 50,000, 60,000, or is that too many?
It wasn't that many. So there was kind of two operations. Frequent Wind was the helicopter airlift, and that was in the thousands, but it was about 138,000 refugees all told, if you include Babylift and everything else.
Okay, very good. I'm going to go back. Before I go to Mary Nell, I want to go to Mary Murray, because I think she got her microphone fixed. Mary, tell us a little bit of your story, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we hear you.
Okay. In 1973, I think around June, I was abandoned in a marketplace in Saigon, and someone found me there and brought me to the orphanage. I was malnourished, kind of like what Toby said, and I was hospitalized for dehydration, malnourishment for a while. I think I had scabies, and they treated me for that too. And I was, Sister Kateri Coverman took care of me there. And then I was adopted to the United States to an American family in March of 1974. So I came before Operation Babylift. I was one of the first children to come to the United States. So I was raised in New Jersey and moved down to North Carolina and married, and I have 2 kids now. I actually now teach nursing students at the university here, and going back for my doctorate nursing practice. So I lived a good life here, and I'm going back to Vietnam for the first time since I've been born with Sister Mary Nell next March. So I'm really excited to see where I'm from, reconnect with my roots, and I've been trying to find some family members through 23andMe and see if I can find any living surviving family members. So I've been trying to do that too.
Are you brushing up on your Vietnamese language skills?
I'm not good. Not yet, but I'll work on it.
Yeah, well, good luck, because that's a heck of a language.
I'm better with Google Translate and typing it, but pronunciation, not yet.
Oh my gosh, the pronunciation is a minefield. That pronunciation, boy, you get it wrong. And Eva, do you speak Vietnamese at all?
I do. I would say it's more conversational. I grew up with my grandparents, my aunts and uncles till I was about 12 years old.
Okay.
So yeah, we spoke it in the household.
Mary Nell.
I just want to say how fascinating this program is. I could listen to every person who's on our Zoom all night long with the stories. This is just, thank you, Todd, so much for scheduling this, to Jason and Eva for writing the book that prompts us to be able to have some of this information that we've for so long wondered about. Thank you. And I'm so glad that Mary was able to get her microphone to work so we could hear a bit of her story. And the irony of the fact that good nursing is what saved her life from having been abandoned. And now she is teaching nursing skills to new nurses. I think, wow, that in itself is such a story. And many of the adoptees have tried searching for a birth family through 23andMe, Ancestry.com, and a few have been successful, sometimes a little bit too late to actually get to meet a mother, a birth mother, a birth father, but have gotten connected with blood relatives that way. And so we're hoping that more of that can continue, and it is through the magic of the science of DNA that can take place. So thank you immensely for this.
Oh, you're the best, Sister Mary. No, thank you so much for thanking us. And how remarkable it is that you're going back with 60 people to Vietnam. That's just absolutely inspiring. Mary, no, I do expect an article in our magazine from you about the trip. All right, is it a deal?
Okay, we'll shake on it.
All right, that's terrific. Justin Miller from Dallas, how are you?
Well, good evening, everybody. This is for Toby. What part of Vietnam were you adopted from?
Okay, that's for Toby. Let's see. And we are, Justin, you did not drink all those wine bottles behind you, did you?
That is those wine bottles are from a virtual wine tasting on a Cortona, Italy.
Okay. Okay, very good. So for official wine tasting. Okay, Toby, I'm going to ask you if you want to unmute and say what part of Vietnam you are from.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. You'll have to excuse the background. I'm cooking orange chicken for dinner. But
Toby, can I come over for dinner?
yeah, come on over. There's enough. There's rice too. So I really don't know exactly what district, but we believe it was Ho Chi Minh City. Probably like a maternity clinic. I think it was pretty common where women would go there and give birth to their son or daughter and then leave, in a few hours. I don't know anything about my biological family at all, but I'm just very, very grateful that my mom decided to, give me up for adoption.
Well, the reason I ask is I was with the 25th Division, my first tour, and we worked a lot with the Cowboy Temple up near Tay Ninh and the nurses there, and I say the sisters there, with the children they had. I don't think I ever knew a name. I did know the young man I met. He was a Buddhist monk. He became their head guy. And about 9 years ago, I went back, and he had passed away 6 months before I got there, which was a real shame.
Oh.
But they did great work up there. And we did evacuate kids from there down even to 12th Evac Hospital, even though they weren't supposed to take them on. My nurses took care of them. So thank you for surviving.
Yeah. That's it. Toby and Mary, you're survivors. Eva, survivor. It's really amazing that you're here to kind of share the story and then go back and discover your own origins. Jason, can I ask you a question? You're an Air Force veteran who served in Vietnam. There's a picture that you shared of you in Kabul. Kabul fell 3 years ago this week. When that happened in 2021, a lot of our Vietnam veterans had kind of flashbacks to the fall of Saigon 1975. And they really, I think, enjoyed talking with or found meaning in talking with Afghanistan veterans and asking them what they thought and felt. What did you feel 3 years ago this week when you saw Kabul fall?
I thought of Vietnam, to be honest with you. It's the first thing I thought of, because we were in the middle of all of this at that time. And so it definitely resonated with me, but it resonated too in another way for me because I served there. And, I knew enough about the fall of Saigon that I knew that veterans who had served in Vietnam were so frustrated when that all happened. And I felt the same frustration about Afghanistan because, you just look at it and you go, well, what was that all for? Same question that the Vietnam guys had, 50 years ago, unfortunately.
I mean, another thing that happened, another anniversary this week is VJ Day, victory over Japan. And with that, the end of World War II in 1945, there was an ending. There was a bookend to this awful, terrible war that took so many millions of lives and impacted the entire world. But there was an end to it. And there was even a celebration here in the US. There wasn't that for your war in Afghanistan, and there wasn't that for Vietnam. And I think that takes its toll on those who do the fighting.
I would agree with you. I would also say, though, that everything produces, what was it Fred Rogers said, whenever there's something bad happen, always look for the helpers. That's what his mom always taught him growing up. And so I feel like that's what you have to look for. And, here we are 50 years past the whole Vietnam experience. We're not that far out of the Kabul experience. So we haven't really seen the ripple effects yet of the Kabul experience, but we are seeing the ripple effects of Vietnam. Look at Eva and some of these folks that are on tonight have all these stories that are fascinating and interesting, and they're survivors and they're doing great. I mean, it really gives you hope.
And not only that, Jason, but in Vietnam itself, especially South Vietnam, especially Saigon, as an American tourist, you get, and if you're a Vietnam veteran and you go back to Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City, you do get young people who come up and will shake the veterans' hands and say, thank you for coming here 50 years ago and trying to help us. We're working towards a democracy. Some of the more hopeful ones will say, and certainly we're a prosperous economy and we have you to thank. It's very, I think, gratifying. I think every single Vietnam veteran I know who has gone back to Vietnam has found it a healing and positive experience and has left the country feeling more positive about their own service. And I could only hope, Jason, that someday you'll be able to say the same thing after a trip to Afghanistan, say, to tour. Yeah.
So,
Bob,
somehow I don't know that I'll be buying a home there anytime soon.
I want to go to Bob Flage, then back to Mary Nell. Bob.
Yes, sir. I tell you, the fall of Afghanistan brought on a couple emotions. First, I was angry, and then it brought on a depression. I feel like that's the closest I've had to a real flashback of Vietnam. I came home in '68, but seeing what happened, the anger turned to depression, and I basically cried when I saw that.
Yeah.
And I could not believe, the government pulled another one.
Bob, do you remember the fall of Saigon, April 30th, 1975, where you were, what you thought?
I was back home. I had finished school. I'd come back, finished school, I'd gotten married and was working, with the juvenile justice system. But, seeing it on television and seeing what was happening, it definitely was crushing at that point. But, as I've gotten older, events have affected me more so than, when I came home when I was younger and dumber. But,
yeah, exactly. You're a little smarter and more sensitive now. Joe Boscia, one of our Vietnam veterans, I just saw him at our Beaver County breakfast last week. He said that he remembers vividly April 30th, 1975, and it was so devastating to him watching it on TV that he called his boss and said, I can't come into work today. Give me the day off. I really need to be by myself today. So that's a date that really still lives, I think, with thousands upon thousands of our Vietnam veterans. Mary Nell.
I want to piggyback on Justin's comment about how his unit in Vietnam was helping some of the orphans at the orphanage. That was our story for all the years that Rosemary was there, that the military would provide transportation for her and orphans coming down from Da Nang to Saigon. And we knew of veterans who would be organizing back home groups that would collect clothing and baby formula and supplies to send to us. Really, that is honestly how we survived. And so I want to make sure that veterans know how grateful we are and how much we understand that without their help, we would not have been able to do what we did. And the second thing is my housemate was helping us in Saigon there in April 1975, and she was on the last flight on the 28th of April that was evacuating our children, Ruth Roughton. And she's going to just greet you briefly.
Yes, hi. I was in Vietnam for the last 2 weeks and trying to get the military people to take the orphans out. We had about 250 because sisters from the countryside kept sending orphans into Rosemary to get them out. So when I arrived, I thought we had an aircraft, non-SCAD airline that a chief pilot, I'm a retired flight attendant for American, I worked for American Airlines then. And we thought we had an aircraft that was going to take them out. And when I got there, they received a telegram that said, no, that airline had canceled. So we started from square one. And I went to the airport and met with a Buford, I don't know if he was, I think he was a Major Buford that was part of the group that were evacuating. And I kept reminding him that we had 250 children, that needed to go out. And he said, well, they want to get the Vietnamese people who work for the government and the families out. So I keep reminding them that you're there, that you're here. And then one of the trips I made out, the sergeant was there and he was saying, you and that sister better get out of here. And I said, I want to get out on that airplane sitting right out there on the tarmac, but I've got 250 pieces of baggage and I'm not leaving them. So when you take my baggage, I'm here to go. And she is too. But anyway, we were able to get 4 of the children out on the last Pan Am flight. Brother John Carr took those children and I went down to the American Embassy to get their American visas stamped. And that day, the government, the embassy had said they wanted to take Amerasian children out. When I got to the embassy, all around the embassy were women lined up around, how big the American embassy is there, trying to get the children out. Americans had no idea how many Amerasians were there. Oh. But so, and then on my way there and back, there were people trying to hand me children, please take my child, just so they could get out. And of course, we were dealing with orphans, so we did not. But anyway, we did finally got the okay to go and left on the C-141 to Manila with the children. Spent a week there and then processed them out to Sister Mary Nell, who was waiting in San Francisco for them. But anyway, that's but what I'll have to say for now. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that. I want to share, this is a picture of Mary Nell.
Oh, wow.
In Vietnam with some babies. Here's another wonderful picture. There she is at the orphanage.
Wow, cool.
Or at the nursery. I'm sorry, the nursery. And then here she is in San Francisco doing the paperwork to receive orphans back in the US. Oh boy, that's heroism, right? That's a picture of heroism right there. And it's not a hero who's, pulling a trigger or fighting an enemy, but doing paperwork. But there's heroism in that. And I love that we're being able to do a program on that. Dave Seaver, how are you?
I am just blown away. The parallels between Saigon and Kabul are just uncanny. I was in Qatar when that happened, and we got 58,000 refugees. I actually saved the Stars and Stripes, which if you would like to borrow, I'd be happy to loan them to you, Todd, but I want them back. Okay. Here's the first one, which you probably can't see, but it's dated July 3rd, and it says U.S. leaves Bagram Airfield. That was a gut punch because part of me is there.
Yeah. Part of you will never leave.
Ironically,
I was there too.
Yeah. I was there in 2010 during the surge, and I've seen the cost of war. Ironically, September 3rd is unexpected delivery, and it's an article about the 9 babies that were born at All You Need during this whole evacuation. So it's just uncanny, the parallels that are there.
Got that right.
Yeah.
Uncanny. And it's such a mixture of emotions because it's such a beautiful story to hear about people coming to this country and, and surviving and making it, and all the effort, all the wonderful people who helped others survive and get out. But then there's the bitterness of losing your country. And Eva, you're somebody, and that's right. Dave Seaver is a nurse. That's important. Dave, you were one of those heroic, life-saving experts. Eva, I suppose you could say that you were fortunate in that you were young enough that you didn't, that great smiling picture of you as a refugee. You were so young, you didn't really know what was going on. But your poor mother lost everything. I mean, she lost her father, she lost her husband, she lost her country. How did she get her life back on track and together when she came to this country?
So I deeply admire my mother's strength. So it took us 40 years to actually talk about it and share what happened.
You're kidding me.
Yeah. So this whole book has been extremely therapeutic for me, for my family. Just, you don't want to, people don't want to talk about tragedy. They don't want to revisit bad things. So if nothing else, I just wanted it documented. I wanted my boys to know about it. I wanted to make sure they appreciated, the sacrifice it took to come here and to always appreciate what we have.
How hard was it to get your mother to talk about it?
It took a lot. It took a lot of convincing to talk about it. And because my uncles were part of my aunts, I think once we started the process, we had interviews, they were hearing things for the first time they had never shared with each other. That's how we were able to shape the story, like what happened on that C-130. There were different points of views. And then they were literally, wait, you've never told me this before. And it actually brought us closer as a family. And it was very therapeutic and self-healing. And my mom's, she didn't want to share the story because she was like, I don't want anybody's pity. And I was like, Mom, it's not about pity. It's about sharing strength. And by sharing this story, I'm hoping other people will also speak and share what happened, because it is healing. And I think it's important for everybody to know. I think there's, even though, yes, we're a Vietnamese family, but there's some universal themes in this book that I think doesn't matter where you are, I think you can relate to.
Oh, absolutely. It's a universal story. Oh, absolutely. That's what, that's how, and part of Jason's expertise and your expertise in crafting the book is to reach people who really wouldn't necessarily know anything about the fall of Saigon, but it's a human story. It's a basic, fundamental human story. Mary Nell.
I want to thank Eva for giving praise to the members of the Falls Church Presbyterian Church. When I came home from Vietnam, I worked in resettlement with Lutheran Social Services, and boy, do I know how invaluable the committees at various churches were in helping refugees get started, to find them housing, furnishings, clothing, get children enrolled in school, get people to medical care, get jobs for the adults, get everyone into some kind of English tutoring or classes, transportation, teaching them public transportation. It was just a gift beyond my ability to tell how wonderful people have been to reach out to the farther neighbor. And so, Eva, thank you so much for giving credit to the Falls Church Presbyterian Church.
It's the least that we can do. I mean, it was life altering, the contributions and the support they provided. We wouldn't be where we are today without their support.
The helpers are everywhere, Mary Nell.
Yeah, that's right.
Mr. Rogers was right. They are everywhere, but man, but you do have to, you do have to search them out. You have to look for them. And, part of my job with the Veterans Breakfast Club, I think, is to ask them questions, is to bring them out, draw them out. And so I'm grateful to you, Mary Nell, for coming on tonight. Jason and Eva, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for sharing this evening with us. And thank you all for your time in this conversation. We'll be archiving this program on our webpage. You could always find it at veteransbreakfastclub.org. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be on Facebook also. And I hope to see many of you on Thursday night at 7 p.m. when we talk about the fall of Afghanistan. All right. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, guys.